All right, we're going to finish off chapter 9, starting at verse 10, and then chapter 10. And again, just a reminder, tomorrow or Sunday, whichever on the weekend, just to look to spend half an hour of just spending time reflecting, talking, listening to God, but just focusing on the goodness of God, praising God, looking for what God has done in your life, and just whatever makes sense for you to do that. Again, take a walk. Maybe it's just writing down kind of a list of different things that God has done for you, blessed you with, and just whatever will help you kind of respond to God in praise. And spend about half an hour doing that. Just carve out time over the next, or over this weekend. Anyways, 1 Kings 9, verse 10 and chapter 10. These chapters finish off what could be considered those high points of Solomon's reign as recorded in the book of Kings. And again, what sounds so good on so many levels also contains in it seeds of Solomon's eventual betrayal of good wisdom. Again, Solomon, so many levels, great king for Israel. I mean, we're reading economic prosperity shown by the building project, social stability by defeating potential internal enemies, and protection from external threats through alliance and trade, military strength. I mean, silver, as plentiful as stone. Just maybe tomorrow you'll go and walk on the beach here and just imagine like every stone you see was pieces of silver. That's the image of Israel under Solomon's rule here. Solomon, international fame and acclaim. I mean, in so many ways, Solomon just appears as the perfect king. I mean, we're in the middle of an election season, right? We're coming up in a little bit to appoint a new or continued leader of our nation. Wouldn't we want a leader who has this kind of resume or is this kind of capacity? So many ways Solomon appears as the perfect king, and yet we're going to see Solomon wasn't the perfect king. The book of Kings is not about how great Solomon was and then how all the other kings sucked in comparison. The book of Kings isn't about any one of the particular kings. They're not the main character. It's God. And we see how God worked through the rise and the fall of the nation of Israel in cooperation or sometimes and often despite the kings. And all of this amazing power, wealth, and fame of Solomon didn't make the nation strong in covenant with God. In fact, as we'll see when we get into the prophets, one in particular, Zechariah, who's after the exile, he describes the ideal king as one who would come riding on a donkey, not on a war horse or one of Solomon's horses for his chariots. What we're going to see as we continue on in Kings is that Solomon forgot, and the nation of Israel would continually and eventually forget. The amazing gifts that God had given them were not for themselves first. They were called to be a light to the nations. The gifts God had given them in this wise king and this prosperity through Solomon, it was to be for others and for the glory of God. For example, all these things that are going on, and we'll read in the prophets that one area where Israel struggled, and again, even in the midst of this prosperity, care for the poor is a thread that runs through the Old and New Testaments as a practice of God's people, whether inviting the poor to sacrifice with you in the Old Covenant system, or the early church we see caring for widows. Those who had financial abundance gave to those who had lack. Jesus said we cannot serve both God and money. As we'll see, Solomon, the nation of Israel, had all this abundant wealth. And while money is not the root of all evil, Paul wrote to Timothy, the love of money is at the root of many kinds of evil. And as we're going to continue to go through Kings, money's not the only source, but it's one of the things. There's an aspect where this amazing gift, when not kept in the proper place, becomes toxic, becomes poisonous. And so just as today, as I bring this one to a close, again, encourage you to reflect on the gifts that God has given you, using them wisely. And again, I'll just encourage me to consider and reflect, how might the gifts God has given us be self-oriented? Are we allowing them to be self-focused rather than on how, God, are you leading us to bless and invite others through the gifts you've given us, from salvation to the Holy Spirit to whatever God has given you in particular to bless and invite others? Because if it stays to ourselves, it will inevitably become toxic to our listening, trusting, and obeying Jesus. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you. May the Lord be gracious to you. And today would you know his peace. God bless.